Happy day students. Today we are going to read about social science topic history chapter 4, the age of industrialization, grade 10. The chapter starts with the image of dawn of century. A popular music publisher, E.T. Paul, produced a music book that had a picture on the cover page announcing the dawn of the century. If you look at this picture, you will see that in the center there is a goddess like figure. Okay, in the center, let me take a marker. In the center, you will see a goddess like figure. Okay, she is holding a flag which is a symbol of new century. You can see her standing on a wheel which has got wings. That means she's flying into future. She's flying into progress. That means she's having a flag of the new century. She's standing on a wheel with wings and she's flying into the future. And now future in this picture is glorified with the images of machines. Now how can you say future means machines? If you see around her, you will see various pictures that are present around here. Okay, it has pictures of steam engine, boat, generator, a spinning wheel. So basically this image is glorifying machines. This image is glorifying industrialization. So the importance that is given to age of industrialization is shown in this particular picture. Now if you move on to the second picture, there are two halves in the picture. The first half here basically it talks about Aladdin. If you remember your stories, your bedtime stories, you remember Aladdin used to have a magic lamp in his hand, and if you used to rub it, and genie used to come in and grant wishes, come out and grant wishes. Basically the top picture is talking about Aladdin having a magic lamp. That means what? Magic, mystery, nothing is reality. This is mostly used to indicate the Orient. Okay, Oriental mostly talks about Asia, India included in that. The down picture, if you see, you can see a mechanic holding a machine, and you can also see images of bridges. Okay, images of the steam engine, images of high rising buildings. So basically this particular image is talking about machines and development and industrialization. So the top one is talking about backwardness, magic and mystery, and the down one is talking about progress, development, industrialization. The top picture is indicating the Orient, which is talking about East, according to the person who made this particular art piece. Is thinking that the East, that is Asia included, is backward in a field, in a realm of magic, whereas the West with its machine and the mechanic is actually forward, developed and industrialized. So now we will come to a topic called proto-industrialization. Industries means what? What comes to our mind? That goods are produced on a very large scale for within the country usage and also international usage. Does that mean that before industrialization there was no mass level production? Of course there was mass level production, and that was with the help, that was within domestic or traditional units, which we called as the proto-industrialization. If you see, that's called proto-industrialization. That means a stage before the first stage. Even before industrialization came, steam engines came into picture. Production of goods and services was happening on a large scale, but within a small traditional units or domestic units. It is not based on factories, but however it was for the international market. Okay, now during this proto-industrialization, trade developed within towns as well as cities. But in towns, you need to understand that trade was mostly controlled by what we call as guilds. Guilds are nothing but a group of traders, okay, who used to control production, train craftsmen, decide what is the price of the finished commodity, control the prices of raw material. Now these guilds had complete monopoly of trade over towns. They never allowed the merchants who wanted to expand the trade in towns. When the demand for goods increased with colonization, demand for goods increased. When the traders wanted to, merchants wanted to increase their trade in the towns, these guilds never let them go ahead in towns. So the merchants had to move to the countryside. So now we are coming up to the coming up of factories. Okay, the earliest factory in England came up in 1730s, no doubt about it. But Before the factories came up, production, as I told, also happened on traditional units on a large scale, that is for international market. But the production during proto-industrialization was broken up into bits and pieces, and here and there in the countryside it was present. So one merchant who was trying to control trade through production in countryside used to have about 20 to 25 people at every step of production in different location. But whereas the first symbol of new era was cotton, and Richard Arkwright, let me take an highlighter. Richard Arkwright created the first cotton mill. The advantage of this first cotton mill is that the production during proto-industrialization, which was broken up into bits and pieces and present in countryside, now came under one roof. So better supervision of the entire production process and better supervision of the quality of the finished products can take place. So Richard Arkwright created the first cotton mill. But the first symbol of new era was cotton. Later on only you see other industries coming up. But first it was cotton only that came into picture. The pace of industrial change. You need to keep in mind, as I told before, cotton was the first industry that developed. Later, metal industry developed, and iron and steel industry also developed. The first most important industry that developed was cotton industry. Later, with the railways coming up, the metal industry, iron and steel industry also came up. But we need to understand the moment technology was introduced, it was not readily accepted by people. They could not displace, the new industries could not completely displace the traditional ones. Why? Because in the traditional ones, small inventions happened that kept these traditionals running. In fact, the workforce that was employed in the traditional units were more than the one employed in the new industries. Okay, and these industries thrived, like the pottery, leather making, tanning. All these industries survived side by side even when the new industries came up. Technological changes occurred very slow because during that time Britain had lot of hand labor. So the industrialists were really reluctant to buy a steam engine, which would be very expensive to maintain, and what would happen if it breaks down. So the industrialists preferred hand labor over the steam engine that was invented by James Watt. Actually, if you go on later, you will see James Watt is not the person who has actually invented it. James Watt improved the steam engine produced by Newcomen and later patented the new engine. It was his industrialist friend Matthew Boulton who manufactured it. New technology was not readily accepted. It was because the high maintenance if it breaks down, and the labor was seasonal and it was readily available. Therefore, the industrialists did not see the need to invest in machines that was so expensive. So the pace of industrialization was not really at very high speed initially. As I told before, technology was not readily accepted in Britain because hand labor was available freely. Number of job seekers were more. There was no shortage of human labor. Okay, so why should they invest in machines which are expensive in the first place, and later maintenance of machines year long would be very expensive also. Therefore, hand labor was preferred. Another reason why hand labor was preferred, because labor was seasonal. That means in many occasions they did not require the laborers to be present full year. Okay, for example, if you take book binding, breweries, maintenance of ship, these used to happen only during one particular season. For example, book binding, to publish the Bibles only during the month of November and December, they required labor. Okay, maintenance of ship used to happen only during winter season. So what they did was, only during the time of need they used to hire the labor, and after the work was over, the labor used to be sent home. So the industrialists preferred hand labor. They need not employ them year long. And also, the Victorian Britain, the elite group, the bourgeois community, they did not prefer the machine made goods, because all the machine made goods, will look alike. Even now we see, if you go to any particular shop, same design garments will be present in different sizes. But the elite Victorian Britain, the group, they preferred very intricate and unique designs which were very exclusive. That means whatever one person was wearing, they did not like if other person wore it. This uniqueness in each garment or each item is possible only with hand labor. Okay, with technology, that is with steam power, it is not possible. So that is why they preferred hand labor over steam power. The fear of unemployment. Now, we know in the traditional units, one wheel, that is to spin yarn, one wheel used to rotate one spindle. Okay. Now, something called as spinning jenny, okay, has been invented. Okay. Spinning jenny is invented. Now, what is the speciality of spinning jenny is, if you take this one particular wheel can rotate many spindles that are present here. So one wheel is rotating spindles. Usually the spinning work in traditional units was done by women. Women used to do the spinning job in the traditional units with the traditional equipment, that is one wheel rotating one spindle. Now spinning jenny was invented. What is spinning jenny? It's a device that has been invented by James Hargreaves in 1764. What this machine did is, this machine speeded up the spinning process and reduced the labor demand. So in place of hiring one, five or ten labor, usually one labor can do, because each spindle can rotate up to 10 to 15 spindles. Therefore, they can fire the other people. So now this spinning work was usually done by women. The moment spinning jenny was introduced or invented, the fear of unemployment made the workers hostile. When the moment a new technology was introduced, the fear of losing their jobs, they became very hostile, and the ladies along with their husbands in fact attacked the units that were employing the spinning jenny for the fear of unemployment, because now they are going to get fired. The machine is going to replace these people. Therefore, out of fear, they attack the spinning jenny. So that is the reason. You can get a 3-mark question. Why did the woman attack the spinning jenny? The age of Indian textiles. The finer varieties of the cotton was manufactured everywhere in the world, but the fine variety of cotton that was produced in India was in great demand in rest of the world. Therefore, merchants from everywhere, Armenia and Persian merchants, they used to come to our ports, and take the finished product to sell in other countries in rest of the world. Okay. Now, that time many pre-colonial ports were present, which were active and bubbling with trade. Okay, the pre-colonial seaports were like the Surat on the Gujarat coast connected India to the to the Gulf and the Red Sea ports. Musalipatnam on the Coromandel coast and Hooghly in Bengal had trade link with Southeast Asian ports. Now, a variety of people were involved in this production. Okay, the entire process was broken up. It was like a network. Okay, the activities that used to take place within the countryside, within towns, and not along the coast, we had merchants who used to take care of it. And after the finished product, they used to take the finished product to the seaport. They used to bargain with the big merchants who were present, who would buy it and take it to rest of the world through seaports. Now, before the pre-colonial time, the seaports that mostly flourished were, as I told, Surat and Hooghly. They were bubbling with trade. This was during pre-colonial period, but once the East India Company gained control over textile production, these two seaports lost their trade importance. New seaports came into existence. They, like the Bombay and the Calcutta, they grew. Slowly, the trade that was happening through Gujarat and Hooghly reduced, and Bombay and Calcutta came. Even if any trading houses were present, one or two that were left out in Surat and Hooghly, they had to completely work under the instructions of the East India Company. So slowly, the old seaports died like Surat and Hooghly, and the new seaports like Bombay and Calcutta came into picture. Now that, as I have said, post-colonial period, that means East India Company, okay, how it has taken control of textile production. Once it has taken control of textile production, what happened to the weavers is what we are going to see. Okay, now initially East India Company, for it to establish monopoly over trade, it was not possible until it established a political power. It could assert a monopoly right. Okay, this by gaining various concessions from the local rulers. Slowly they established a political power. Once they established a political power, let me take a marker. W- Once they established a political power, it could easily assert a monopoly right. But this monopoly right, they did not do it in one swing. It was done step by step. First, what they did is they tried to eliminate the existing traders. Initially, even before this, other than East India Company in the country, there were other European rulers like the Dutch and the French. First, they have to eliminate. In order to eliminate them, they have to gain control of weavers. In order to gain control of weavers, step by step process was formed. Okay, first step they did was the company tried to eliminate the existing traders, okay, and brokers who connected with cloth trade, okay, and they wanted to establish more direct contact with the weavers. Before, a broker was present in between, okay, between the weaver and the buyer of the finished product. Now the company removed that broker. Instead, they appointed a particular person called as gumasta. Who was a gumasta? He was a paid servant whose job was to supervise the weavers, okay, so, and also get the finished products to the East India Company. Therefore, now the traders and the brokers were totally removed from the picture. Now, second is, it prevented the company prevented the weavers from dealing with other buyers. There were even other buyers, as I told. The Dutch was present, the Portuguese were present, the French were present. So the weavers now, East India Company want to gain complete control of the weavers. They wanted to, how they did, they started giving advance to the weavers and told them, we will give you money, we will help you to buy your raw material. Once you finish your product, you have to sell your product to us. When money was coming, weavers eagerly agreed. They thought that it is a good thing, but they did not realize that once they take advance from East India Company, they cannot sell the finished product to any other European country. Now their hands are tied. They have to respond only to Britishers. Okay, initially it looked very well, but later the relation between the gomastas and the weavers was not really cordial. Initially, the merchants and traders who used to trade in countryside and towns, the relationship was very good. But these gomastas later, they started showing their power. They used to march into the villages with sepoys, beat up the weavers if they could not meet the deadlines, or if they were not happy with the product they were finished. Okay, once the situation started breaking up and these weavers could not go to any other European countries, they started giving up their weaving industry and they went away to, literally ran away to nearby villages and started some other livelihood. Now Manchester comes to India. Now let me quote what Henry Patauli said. He is a company official. He said the demand for Indian textiles could never reduce since no other nation produced goods of same quality. He said the quality of the cotton textiles that are made by India were of fine quality and therefore the demand would never reduce. But we see that by the beginning of 19th century, we see, let me take a marker, by the beginning of 19th century, we see a huge decline of Indian textile export from India. Now, what happened? When the Indian textiles were of good quality, why did the export start? Now, because Manchester comes into picture. As cotton industries developed in England, industrial groups began to worry about the import from other countries. Okay, now in Britain itself, cotton industries have come up. They are making their finished products. Therefore, if goods from other country are coming into Britain, what will happen to the goods that are made within Britain? Therefore, they pressurize the government to impose import duties to whatever textiles were flowing into Manchester. Therefore, we could not send our textiles to other countries or even Manchester or Britain, which used to buy our products. We could not, because the industries that were coming in Britain stopped other products entering. And they did not stop there. They not only assured that only their machine made goods will be sold in Britain, they also persuaded the East India Company to sell British manufacturers in Indian markets as well. So exports of British cotton goods increased dramatically in the early 19th century. At the end of 18th century, you will see there have been virtually no imports of cotton piece goods into India. Okay, only finished products were coming and cotton piece goods were not coming. By 1850s, cotton piece goods constituted over 31% of the value of Indian imports, and by 1870s, the figure was over 50%. Now, therefore, the cotton weavers in India faced problems. What are the problems they have faced? Okay, their export market collapsed, because now Britain is assuring that whatever cotton which was in demand in the world now from India cannot be sold, and their machine made goods should be sold. So cotton weavers lost their export market, and local market also shrank because the imported machine made goods were sold at a cheaper price and people wanted to buy cheaper price. Okay, now civil war broke out in America at the same time. Therefore the cotton that was required, okay, that they used to get from America now stopped. So Britain came to India to buy raw cotton. America cannot supply because they are already having civil war. Okay. Now the raw cotton from India also was brought by Britain. Okay. And now the Indian weavers who used to buy raw cotton from our sellers, now they had to compete with the British who was buying raw cotton, which was at a very high price. Therefore, the condition of the Indian weavers now is not really good. Now, the first cotton mill in Bombay came up in 1854. Okay, this slide talks about various factories that have come up in India, and we should see that not only in Britain, even in India, many factories have come up, and there are few important things that have been noted in this particular slide for you to memorize. The years are very important, so you need to memorize the mill that has come up along with the year that is shown in the slide. Okay, the first cotton mill in Bombay came up in 1854 and it went into production 2 years later. By 1862, four mills were at work with many spindles and looms. Around the same time, jute mills also came up in Bengal, the first being set up in 1855. The first jute mill came up and another one came up in 1862. In North India also, Elgin mill was started in Kanpur. Okay, in the 1860s, and a year later the first cotton mill of Ahmedabad was set up in 1874. The first spinning and weaving mill of Madras began production. Many Indian entrepreneurs are also there who had set up these industries. So factories now started coming up in India as well. Now, the early entrepreneurs in India, the British India began exporting opium to China, to tea from China to England. Taking advantage of this business, many people who made money in this opium trade started industries in India. Few of them are like Dwaraknath Thakur made his fortune in the China trade. Okay, in Bombay, Dinsha Petit and Nusranji Tata built huge industrial empires. Merchants from Madras traded with Burma, Middle East, and East Africa, and they also became little prosperous during this time. Now you see the peculiarities of industrial growth. Okay, with the now the war has started. British is very busy with the production to meet the let me take an highlighter. Now the British is very busy. They are trying to meet the needs of the war, and therefore whatever they were supplying to elsewhere in the world for trade now stopped. They were focusing more on the army. Therefore, the British mills were supplying whatever they could to for the British army to fight the war. Okay, now what happened? Manchester imports into India declined. That means what? The finished products that were sold in the Indian markets at low cost, now it reduced. Therefore the factories in India now found a chance. The local market is opening up for the Indian factories. So the Indian factories started slowly. Now the business started. One more added advantage to our Indian factories was the war prolonged. It went on for a longer time, and therefore what the British has done is they asked the Indian factories, okay, to supply even to the war. So local market also our Indian factories are producing. They are tapping the local markets, and also now they are supplying for the war needs like jute bags, cloths for army uniform, tents, and other leather boots. Now the Indian factories are supplying. Therefore the working hours increased and also the industrial production boomed. Okay, so now the Indian factories are at an advantage. After the war, Manchester could never recapture its old position in the Indian market. Once the Indian industries took control, even after the war was over, Manchester could not come back to the same state. Unable to modernize and compete with the US, Germany, and Japan, the economy of British crumbled after the war. Cotton production collapsed and exports of cotton cloth from Britain fell dramatically. Within the colonies, local industrials gradually consolidated their position, substituting foreign manufacturers and capturing home markets. Small scale industries, as I told before, even though big industries came into picture, small industries also survived because small inventions happened. As I told before, that is how the small scale domestic and traditional units survived. Okay, most of the workers worked in small workshops and household. More workforce was actually employed in the domestic factories only. And one of the most important inventions, small inventions, which I said kept these small industries thriving, one of it was a fly shuttle, as I'm showing in this particular picture. It's a fly shuttle. Fly shuttle is a mechanical device used for weaving. It is moved by means of ropes and pulleys. Okay, it places the horizontal threads into the vertical threads. The invention of fly shutting made it possible for weavers to operate large looms and weave wide pieces of cloth. Now, market for goods. Once the products are produced, they have to be sold in the market. Let me take a, yes. They have to be sold in the market. We have seen how British manufacturers attempted to take over the Indian market, and how Indian weavers and craftsmen traders, they resisted colonial control, demanded tariff protection and all that. But when a new products are produced, people have to be persuaded to buy them. They have to feel like using the products. How can you do? Even nowadays also they do that. How do they do? By advertisement. Advertisement is by in that way they create need in the market. Advertisement makes products appear desirable and necessary. Now, in order to sell the Manchester made goods, one is they used to carry a label made in Manchester. They were a group of people in India who thought that whatever is made in Britain is of good quality. So the moment they saw a label made in Manchester, definitely they agreed. Okay, the another technique they used is they used images of gods, like the image of Lord Krishna on baby food gripe water, and like you see other images of gods, Indian gods, on the labels, in order to appeal to the Indian crowd. That is it, these products are blessed by gods, you can have it. Okay, they also used advertisement in calendars, because not everyone can read what is written here on the advertisements. But calendars, day in and day out, people use. Therefore, even through calendars, people started advertising. So now there we go, starting from how the industries developed, how the steam engine developed, and from there how Indian factories came up and how they took control, to marketing and to advertising we have come. With that, we come to the end of the chapters. Read the content that is given in the textbook. Thank you.